Hi, everybody. Lovely to have this opportunity to come along virtually. I can't wait for the days when we can actually get back in physical environments as well to connect and chat to each other. But before I go over and talk about peer pressure to peer power and why that's a topic that I'm pretty passionate about, and particularly in the context of the theme for this event around breaking silos and increasing communication. So a little bit about who I am, so you know who's in the room with you. My name is Marian O'Brien. I'm one of the co-founders of a boutique consultancy called Project X Partners. And our work is predominantly helping our clients look at how to create agile cultures. So particularly looking at behaviors, values, purpose, mindsets, looking at the partnering with HR and communication teams to look at the various people related processes or processes within that organization that can be a hindrance or a fantastic enabler when we're looking about agile practices. A lot of our clients are well established, and they can come along and say, our technology function's gone agile, but it's not working. You know, the rest of the organization isn't agile. So what's that all about? So we've had the pleasure of working with a variety of global clients in looking at how we establish those ways of working. We are also in context, particularly for today's topic for me, we're also part of the Agile people community, and we embrace and work with a lot of the kind of Agile people principles and values in our work as well. My background, just very quickly, is about 30 years now working in a variety of global organizations in people-related roles, whether that's learning, talent, culture, engagement, executive coaching, change, a lot of change and transformation work over the years. And actually, it's through all of that, and then particularly working with Agile people, that I had the opportunity to write a chapter for a book around peer pressure. So the book is Agile People's, it was released just over a year ago, actually, around the Agile principles and the future of work. And the principle I was asked to write about was peer pressure. And that's kind of what I'm going to bring into the context of today. In terms of questions, would love to make this really interactive, but mindful of time and mindful that we also have time allocated within this hour for Q&A. What I'd like to do is, invite you to maybe make a note of your thoughts, questions, and then when we get into the Q&A session, happy to take them then and respond at that point, but also would invite you to want to put something in there. And I might ask Marianne, because I've realized I'm not great at the multitasking of speaking and keeping an eye on chat. So if there are lots of great questions coming up, Marianne, if you would just flag that as well, that'd be really helpful. And I obviously want to finish on time so that I don't get in Claire's way for her session, which I'm really looking forward to as well. So with that, let me share a slide. And I've just put, because I think it's nice to have some, it'll take a second to come through. I think it's nice to have some visual on the screen for us to reference as we talk through it. So let me talk a little bit about what is it? So what do we mean, or what do I mean by peer pressure? And for me, why I've changed that language to peer power. And then want to talk a little bit around why it's important in the context of certainly breaking silos and increasing communication, and in support of creating agile cultures and enabling agile cultures in organizations. So what is it? Well, peer pressure is a definition. I went out and looked at a variety of different kind of thoughts and ideas. And if anybody just goes and Googles or puts into any search engine the expression peer pressure, what you're more than likely going to see is a lot of articles around teenage peer pressure or negative stories around peer pressure in marketing and advertising, etc. So I found it interesting when I started to research this topic a couple of years ago and realized that peer pressure, at the end of the day, its outcome can be positive or negative. And the positive connotation here we want to talk about is when we harness the power of peers in creating a positive outcome or positive outcomes. So the definition then for me around that is peer pressure is influence on our behavior from a group that we interact with socially or professionally, and can also be exerted by a larger community and or culture. So for this talk, what I'd like to kind of cover is and share some examples of where we've leveraged some peer pressure practices with some of our clients that have really helped enable and encourage and engage, which is important, colleagues and employees across organizations to get involved in thinking about practices, particularly agile culture practices. So what it is, so spoke to that in there. In terms of some of the practical things around what it is, and most of us, I'd be very surprised if there's nobody here, and I'd love to hear when we get into the Q&A some examples maybe that people have seen in their organizations or tools that they're using. But a lot of it comes down to communities, groups of people coming together. So whether that's through, you know, structured, technical or professional communities of practice, this Aginext and Agile community is one of those. It's around networks, certainly tools like LinkedIn increasingly incorporate kind of networks and communities where peers come together to connect with each other. Peer pressure or peer power, as I prefer to think about it, is also a fantastic ally for change. And when harnessed and incorporated in organizations is an amazing force to be reckoned with, particularly when we're trying to approach it and build for the better and draw on strengths of an organization. And I'll caveat that with, I know there can be lots of negative elements that come with it, but for the purpose of today's conversation, I really want to focus in on how when we harness the idea of peer power, how it can support and enable change for good. So, you know, why is it important? So when we have these communities of practice or networks or groups of people getting together around a common cause, it's a fantastic opportunity that creates growth. So growth through sharing of ideas, sharing experiences, talking about ideas, inviting input from others, and all of that can be pretty supportive and future focused around creating growth. It's also that opportunity of harnessing the collective. Any of us joining this talk today who has been part of a team or managed a team, you know, by coming together and sharing what individual skills, capabilities, values, experiences, that harnessing into that kind of diversity of experience and perspectives that people have, that it really helps. You know, it helps, you know, the Aristotle's statement there about, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It really helps kind of bring the collective of individuals together, their thoughts, ideas, and experience that can be harnessed going forward. In terms of what we see in, you know, in our personal lives, and I'll speak for myself, you know, things like Fitbits or Peloton, or tools like Nom. There's a lot of online apps that people sign up to because it helps to create some new habits, whether that's habits around exercise or habits around eating well or sharing kind of experiences with each other on cooking recipes, or in sports as well, sharing tips for coaches, etc. It can lead to new habits, because from learning from other individuals, we can start to practice with what we're hearing. We can also use it with tools like Peloton and Fitbit. You can put challenges in place, and you can, as a collective, push each other forward and push collectively forward on improving your times or you know, calorie burns or whatever it is that you want to set your targets around. But ultimately, all of these tools that we're starting to see come into our personal lives and starting to see in work environments really start to build new habits. And when those tools are co-created with communities coming together and with the collective of ideas being shared, then people, by owning it, they want to be more engaged with it as well. It certainly helps that kind of idea of where we talk about breaking down silos, you know, bringing communities within larger organizations or organizations of any size by bringing people together across different functions, divisions, different lengths of experience in an organization, different backgrounds, different interests. When we bring people together, and certainly some of our clients that we've worked with where they're trying to solve for whether it's a new ask of a client or a new product or some new competitor advantages that we're trying to get ahead of, by bringing kind of diverse groups of people together, it's an opportunity that enables innovation by, again, challenging the thoughts, bringing different perspectives to the conversation. It really helps kind of enable that new idea, new ways of thinking and innovation in organizations, which certainly then breaks down those silos, and the kind of communication that happens through that is really powerful. It can identify opportunities. A lot of certainly working and coaching executive leaders in organizations over the years, many of them will say, but nobody speaks up, and we're not hearing ideas. Now, mindful, we'll all work in different types of cultures, but certainly quite a few of the clients I've worked with, the senior leaders will sometimes be frustrated that people are not speaking up in their organization. And one of the kind of approaches we take into that is this idea of creating groups of peers to come together and inviting them to contribute ideas, whether that's around people and focus groups or around you know, planning for the future or changing a process in innovation as well. By bringing diverse perspectives to the table and to the group really helps harness those opportunities. Attraction and retention. One of the tools like Glassdoor is phenomenal in terms of how people these days, and actually increasingly more because of COVID, when individuals are thinking about an organization to join, from speaking to some of our partners that we work with in the recruitment business, or partners with Fraser Jones as an example, they are seeing that question that has always come up in interviews, you know, tell me about your culture, or what is your culture like? That question is more relevant today than ever, which is why we're also seeing quite a big resignation rate across industry, because people are concerned that the culture of those companies is not for them. So when those individuals are going to market and looking for new roles, new opportunities, they use tools like Glassdoor, and they go in and they want to hear from their peers within those organizations as to whether the culture matches up with the rhetoric or the brand that the organization has in the market. So rather than listening to what a recruiter says, or what even if they get to interview stage, what the interviewer says to them, they will want to go and validate that. So they find these online peer apps, and there's increasing growth in that area as well. So that from an organizational point of view, if you want to attract talent, then you know your employees will be talking to their peers, their networks, and sharing the reality of what it's like. And then once you bring them into an organization, you know, having networks, whether it's around common areas of interest or practices within a company, or for me, certainly 20 years ago, getting involved in an Irish network in an organization when I was in London, just made me feel connected to my roots, to my background. And it also then gave an opportunity to think about, okay, how can we harness our experience and knowledge of that market?
Sorry.
Thanks, Marianne. Of that Irish market, so we could think about new products, etc., to go to that market. It really, there's a lot of research that's been done, particularly through gamification activities, and to develop peer connectivity in organizations. There's research done by the Talent Learning Management System a couple of years ago with some of their clients, and some of the stats that came out of that was when there are good peer to peer activities, whether that's gamification, nudges, tribes, challenges in place in an organization, that they saw that employees rated productivity at about 8 to 9%, that those opportunities, structured opportunities around peers coming together helped with productivity and role, and 88% of employees felt happier. And that particularly came back to, being part of their peer group and not just the brand that they work for, really felt encouraged feelings of belonging and purpose to what they were doing in their jobs. And then through that as well, there are like learning opportunities, sharing best practices, raising profiles as well for individuals and organizations. We see the other wonderful thing that can come out of it, and Google do this through their interviews. They have a peer panel process for interviewing candidates for the organization, which also helps to remove biases through processes. And as we look at, artificial intelligence and creating products that has AI built into it, the more diverse those peer groups are from experience and perspective, can help manage out some of the biases that traditionally can exist. But it's not just in AI, it can be through any practices within an organization. And it gives individuals a real sense of accountability. So you can have formal peer practices in place in an organization and informal peer practices. And through both, what it allows individuals, it gives them space and it gives them an opportunity to kind of feel like they're belonging and contributing to the organization, and that their voice is being heard, which really then builds on their sense of purpose and belonging. But it also then kind of feeds back into their behaviors, from a sense of them having accountability. So if I have contributed to the idea that we are now implementing, then I have a greater sense of accountability to make sure that it's successful. So there's some really wonderful hooks that can be built in. And I think going back to the learning piece, just to wrap it up, for me and my own personal, I'm quite a social individual and have belonged to a number of networks. So for me, that idea of, creating some new habits and practicing those habits is something that I have certainly personally benefited from. It's really helped me in my career over the last 30 years. And being able to go back to those peer groups and being able to use them as mentors, or almost kind of that circle of trust counsel. I need advice on something. So there's lots of human and psychological safety values as well that we can benefit from when we recognize the value of peer pressure